What's on your playlist right now?
As I move into my class,
Go to guilty pleasure food.
Ice cream.
Ice cream.
My name is Dawniell Black, and I'm from Sacramento, California. I came to UC Davis 2 years ago to serve as Executive Director of the California History Social Science Project. Prior to that, I spent 20 years in the Elk Grove Unified School District as both a History Social Science teacher and District Administrator. I'm currently serving the third term as the President of the California Council for the Social Studies. As both a teacher and district administrator, I participated in a wide variety of programs through the California History Social Science Project, and I'm proud to both continue and amplify the work of the organization.
Hi, my name is Beth Slutsky, and I'm the Deputy Director of the California History Social Science Project. I have a PhD in history, and over the course of my career, I've been able to teach at every level, from high school through graduate school. I get to do research and publish articles and books, and most importantly, I get to advocate for the importance of history social science education.
Beth, Dawniell, welcome to Face to Face. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
It's a real pleasure. Looking forward to talking about the California History Social Science Project with you and the power of discussion in the classroom and all the students that you interact with. Very timely since students are going back to school right now. So we're going to have fun with this conversation. Ready to get started?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So I'll start with Beth. So you worked with the California History Social Science Project for quite some time. Can you explain the project and what you do and how it connects with K through 12 education?
Sure. So the History Project is a bridge between the research that happens at the university and how it gets applied in K-12 classrooms around the state. And we also work with the state of California on updating adopted materials that should guide all K-12 public instruction in the state. So I get to work with teachers in person in workshops and on curriculum, and then we get to work with UC Davis students, helping them understand how history education is constructed.
Great. That's the best part, right?
Yes, it is. It really is.
So Dawniell, you've had 20 years of experience in teaching at K through 12. How has that shaped your leadership of the Social Science Project?
So in the 10 years that I was teaching, I attended many History Social Science Project programs, used their resources and recognized them as a valuable source in the work that I was doing. And then when I transitioned to the district office, my role was to support K-12 educators. So prior to that, I was a secondary high school teacher, and so all of my experience was really in 7-12. And so having programs and resources like the California History Social Science Project to lean into and working with elementary teachers for the first time was very important. And at the time that I transitioned to the district office is when the California History Social Science Project had developed and put out the History Social Science Framework in 2016, which also supported the work I was doing and then helped with our adoption of new instructional materials. And so having been engaged with not only the California History Social Science Project, but other projects within the California Subject Matter Project, that really helped develop a relationship with them early on in the work that they did, which definitely then helped in my transition as the executive director.
I see, yeah. And Dawniell, I understand you and I share an appreciation for mentoring and the power of mentoring. Can you talk about one of your mentors, which I understand has been instrumental in your career, Renee Mendoza, who shaped your early years as a teacher?
Yes, and I'm glad to speak about Renee. His birthday's coming up, and it's been almost 10 years since he passed, but he spent 33 years in education. And when I first came into the profession, on the first day when I was sitting at my classroom, I was standing on a desk, and he comes into my classroom and says, "You need to sign up for the supplemental insurance before you stand up on the desk to put things up." And it was kind of a relationship that started then. And one of the things that he was very adamant about that he very much valued was ongoing education. And so he frequently spent summers in different places internationally, increasing his educational learning, and then also just locally. And so in the first year that I was teaching, I applied for a National Endowment for the Humanities grant to attend a 3-week summer institute in Virginia on 18th and 19th century African American writings. And so that really started my leaning towards making sure I'm doing professional development all the time, which then coincides with the work I do now because I provide professional development for teachers. And so there was just very early on that importance of being a lifelong learner.
That's so important, and the instrumental role the mentors play in ensuring your appreciation for lifelong learning is also really, really critical. So thanks for that. So Beth, historians rarely work on transitional kindergarten curricula. Tell us about what that work involves.
So I have the coolest job ever. The History Project is a statewide network. So we are the statewide office, and there's History Project sites around the state. But we're also part of something called the California Subject Matter Project, which is headquartered at UC Office of the President. And so we have colleagues at the Math Project and the Reading and Literature Project and so on and so forth. And when the state has new initiatives, it's our job to learn about that and the research behind it and help teachers implement it. So when California put in place universal transitional kindergarten a couple of years ago, we started a work group where we built up a network of teacher leaders, and we started to do some model lessons and figure out what's the state of TK, what's really needed. We did some really fun work where we essentially connected what we learn as academics, which is students learn through inquiry, with things like play-based learning. So we were able to put on conferences that hundreds of teachers have gone to around the state and do really fun model lessons about like marketplaces and water filters. And we've been able to serve as a bridge in these really exciting ways that I never thought that, our work as academics would be able to be in conversation with early education as clearly as it is.
That's impressive. Given that impact, what would you say to those who say we don't really need to focus on history and social studies education?
I guess I would say there's never been a more important time to do this. I'm obviously very biased because I'm a historian, but I feel like teachers have, and especially history teachers, have this superpower of being able to help students see the past and see historical perspectives on their own terms. And there's something that's really empowering about teaching students to understand why people did what they did in the past without having there be such a value judgment about it. And there's also something really empowering about having students understand how the past informs the present and then how they can then empower themselves to impact the future. So in that regard, I've become, much more optimistic about like the democratic promise of public education.
Yeah, that's powerful. Not only are we empowering the students, in some ways we're also empowering the educators. So I'd like to ask you, Dawniell, how does the California Social Science History Project empower and support our educators? And why is UC Davis the right place to be doing this stuff?
One of the ways in which we really empower educators is bringing them into community with each other. Oftentimes, teachers sometimes feel isolated, especially at the secondary level, if they're teaching a piece of content area that others might not be teaching. Bringing teachers together, whether it be virtually or in person, helps them connect with people who are like-minded individuals to provide them with support in that way. We also develop teacher leaders. A lot of the work that we do is through teacher leaders. And so bringing them in, helping them develop their skills, and then giving them opportunities to provide support for other teachers is a way in which we empower those educators. And I think just by having resources that they can lean into, that helping them lean into the standards, into the framework to provide them with the supports that they need, and being a valuable resource to them by providing sources, but also just as people that they can think with, that they can talk with and engage with. And UC Davis is a great hub because of the region that we're in. And it's a diverse region where you have both rural, suburban, and urban communities. And I also think that our proximity to the capital, just right over the causeway, helps us also consider that impact on a statewide level. And so UC Davis really serves as a hub in this region that connects a wide variety of educators throughout the state.
I would agree. I think people kind of sleep on the unique qualities that we have at UC Davis that kind of makes work like this thrive and possible. How about maybe, Beth, maybe you could share an example or two of how the project has impacted a teacher, a classroom, a group of students, whatever you think is most appropriate.
Sure. Our office was the lead writer of the History Social Science Framework, which is the document that guides K-12 instruction around the state. And soon after the framework was adopted, we had the opportunity to get in front of thousands of teachers. And one of the areas that I enjoyed going to the most was actually in Bakersfield. My goal is to get to parts of the state that don't have direct access to R1, research institutions. And because we're the statewide office and my goal is to work with teachers in all sorts of corners of the state, we were asked to go and work with about 100 or so. Kern High School District is a 9th through 12th grade district. And we spent a few days in 2018 working with 100 teachers, helping them just get up to speed about updates to the state content. So 11th grade teachers were really interested in this new mandate about teaching LGBTQ plus history and disability history. World history teachers were really interested in what does it mean to move away from a Western civ and more towards a global approach. So we started by working with a couple hundred of them, and we were able to build this relationship that lasted over 5 years where we worked with different cohorts of leaders within that community who became mentors to this new generation of teachers who came into the profession during the pandemic. And they're just such a committed group of teachers that have worked in their communities in just the smartest ways. So getting to work with them and be in their classrooms with these high school students over an extended period of time and seeing the teachers grow has just been so rewarding.
I bet. Yeah, it sounds like it. How Dawniell, how do these teachers shape the project's resources and priorities and programs?
We reach out to our teachers through methods that others use, through surveys. And when we do have teachers participating in our programming, we reach back out for feedback so that we're looking at this continuous feedback loop. But we have teacher leaders who are part of the work that we do. So our capacity is very small for the work that we do. And so we can't do our work without bringing in those teacher leaders who then help shape, formulate, facilitate, and then provide feedback on the work that we do. And then just in different spaces that we're in, engaging with educators and asking them, what do you need? What do you want? How can we be supportive? Are ways in which teachers definitely help us develop our programs. There's nothing that we're doing where we're not either incorporating teachers into the actual work or getting feedback and information from them.
That sounds very important. I want to talk about one of the threads that we've been focusing on in face-to-face over the past year and a half, which is federal funding and the importance of federal funding. I wonder, Beth, can you tell us what federal funding has allowed you to do in the project, particularly with respect to the historically underrepresented communities and rural communities?
Yeah, absolutely. We like everyone else in the university system has been subject to cuts, but we really had a bright spot last year when the U.S. Department of Education put out a call for American History and Civics grants, kind of in honor of America 250. And we put in an application for a program called Foundations of Freedom. And what we proposed was to work with teachers from rural parts of California. And we would bring cohorts of them to UC Davis, and they would spend a summer institute living in the dorms on campus and working with our professors and researchers and teacher leaders, building up their own craft, and then taking what they had learned during the summer and going back to their classrooms all over parts of California. But this summer in particular, it was awarded. They're in the far north part of the state, and we're studying what they have done and then the impact that is going to have on their students. So Foundations of Freedom was awarded. It's a 3-year-long program that is having an impact on how underrepresented students and teachers in California are able to make their content most up-to-date, make their pedagogy most engaging, provide students all around the state with access to the most updated materials.
Sounds like a really appropriate use for federal resources.
Absolutely.
And maybe something that couldn't happen without those federal resources.
It would be impossible to support this work without federal resources.
Yeah. Now, I understand, Dawniell, one of the recent workshops for teachers was about the power of discourse in social studies. Share with us some good examples of what discourse-related learning is about and why it's important.
So discourse is valuable for our students, especially as we're still coming out of what happened with the pandemic and students moving online and having less opportunity to interact with each other. And coming back, what opportunities are we giving for them to engage with one another in appropriate forms is also what's very valuable. So it's both how do we get them talking again, and then how do we get them engaging with one another. And so that's been very valuable in supporting teachers and getting back to that, and that it is important to lay groundwork with your students in building relationships with one another, with helping one another recognize perspectives. I think that that's a key component that we do help students understand and educators understand that we're coming from different lenses, different lives, but that does not mean we can't engage with one another. So it really is at first creating those opportunities for us to view each other as humans first and to really build that space for connection before we're getting into content. So again, developing our students to have connections with one another and then providing them with the frames, providing them with the supports to engage in dialogue that's moving us forward, that's not leading to argument, that's different. But how do we engage with one another? How do we listen and practice listening and not just listening so that we can respond, but actually listening to understand?
That's so timely as well. I mean, it's amazing that we're still seeing the ripple effects of the pandemic. I even see it in our students here at UC Davis, not just the K-12 students that you work with. So I applaud that type of work. Let's pretend, Beth, I'm a student. I know it's really hard to see me in that light, but let's pick a topic, say from the Constitutional Convention or from local zoning, or you pick a topic. Walk me through the first 10 minutes of that experience.
Okay.
Not quite 10 minutes, but.
So imagine, I won't spend 10 minutes. Imagine you are a high school student and you are learning about, let's say, like the civil rights movement. All of our classes start with an investigation question so that students are learning that there is no one right or wrong answer. History is an interpretive discipline. And so these are open-ended questions of historical significance. So something like, how did the civil rights movements mobilize between the 1950s and 1970s? And oftentimes our students come into the classroom with this binary, this black and white sense of the civil rights movement. And our exploration is going to be about the interactions, the conversations between the movements. And our goal is to really focus on our day, maybe about how the civil rights movement in California, something like the disability rights movement, the fight for the 504 happened at San Francisco City Hall. And then to look at how organizations like the Black Panther provided food and support, and leaders like Cesar Chavez wrote letters of support for the movement. And as an engagement strategy to get into this pretty complex exploration, we might begin with like a low-stakes gallery walk where I have photographs of individuals and moments in the movement around the classroom, and students are tasked with putting just sticky notes on them for figures and moments that they recognize, and then that gets filled out more over the course of our exploration. So complicating, but then understanding that everyone has an entry point into what we're learning.
Okay, sounds like a really good strategy. Now, some of those topics that you mentioned, Beth, Dawniell, those might be considered controversial topics, some of them. Some teachers have concerns about teaching controversial topics. If they raise those concerns, what would you say to them?
My advice, especially coming from the district administrator standpoint, when I was working with educators, was to lean into your standards and frameworks, that these are government adopted guidance documents. And so when you can point to, when you're developing your lessons, you can point to, this is a California History Social Science content standard that I'm teaching. Or also the framework is a huge document and it does provide that grade level support. So if you are using those documents, that's usually my first layer of advice, is to use your district adopted curriculums, to use the standards, to use the frameworks. And then I also encourage teachers to be open with their parents about what they're teaching. I had a colleague who also happened to be my son's middle school teacher, and she taught humanities. And when she was doing the Holocaust, she recognized that there might be some different things that parents would want to know. And so she would send him a letter that included, these are all the videos we're watching, the links to the videos, this is everything that I'm teaching. And so really, to the extent that you can, keep your parents informed and guardians informed about what you're doing in your classroom so that they can provide that feedback and you can answer any questions about what they might have. But I definitely strongly just encourage that open communication and then leaning into the documents that support the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I would agree. And that partnership with the parents is really important. Now, you can't have any conversations these days without talking about AI. So this one will be no exception. AI is a way for students to get quick answers for questions or writing essays, or at least drafting essays. How does that impact, what does that mean relative to the importance of classroom discussion in this environment where AI is so prevalent?
So arguably, classroom discussion has never been more important. There's been a lot of research. Our colleague Sam Weinberg wrote a book called Why Learn History When It's All on Your Phone. And, so this is nothing new. And it's, underscoring that the role of history education is not for students to memorize this disconnected piece of information or, facts that are disconnected. And it's not even to learn a polished narrative, which is what AI can generate. Instead, it's to teach students to understand sources, to, access primary sources in original languages so that they can ask their own questions and make informed analyses and comparisons. And that classroom discussion is just the core way for them to learn how to engage authentically with the past, with one another, to think critically, and to communicate in a really clear way.
I would agree. And how would you say, Dawniell, that those discussions, that discourse, prepares our students for their eventual participation in civic life?
One of our partners in the California Subject Matter Project is the California Global Education Project, and they have a framework that looks at how to be globally competent. And there's 4 domains to that, which is to investigate the world, recognize perspectives, communicate ideas, and take action. So when we think about that idea of one of the key components being communicate ideas, how do students communicate what they know, basing it on recognizing perspectives, because our goal is we do want them to take action. And taking action might look like different forms of what that is. And when we think about civic engagement and citizenship, that's what we want. We want them to go out into the world and do things. And so a key component of that is they're communicating ideas. And if they don't have those opportunities to build those skills throughout K-12 and throughout their college life, then they're not going to be able to really dig into that key piece of taking action. So it works all together. And I think, again, really focusing on how they are communicating into the world is a key function of what we're supporting in K-12 and what students are getting support with in higher education.
I agree completely. Now, we have a feature in face-to-face, something we call the hot seat. And it's not as intimidating as it sounds. It just means I'm going to ask both of you some rapid-fire questions looking for a one-word or one-sentence answer. Ready?
Yes.
All right, ready or not?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this question's for both of you. What is one historical myth you'd like to retire?
That slavery did not cause the Civil War.
I like that one.
Beth took mine, but
Great minds think alike.
yes, we do. I think also looking back at Reconstruction as a failure instead of Reconstruction as unfinished business.
Wow. Timely. I like that one too. Another question for both of you. Which historical figure deserves the next Hamilton-style musical?
Alice Paul, we need a good feminist suffragist musical.
How about that? Yeah.
I think Malcolm X, because in time there's been shifting about what people knew and understood, but I think a full-on musical looking at his life and thoughts and thinking and where he was going would be of interest.
I would enjoy that myself. So you may know my mom was a teacher. You may not know that. She taught kindergarten and first grade for 45 years or so. In St. Louis, Missouri, public schools. So I've always believed that teachers are important and have some of the most important roles in our lives. Can you remember a teacher at the K through 12 level, or maybe not, someone else at another level who made a big impact in your life?
I had a fifth grade teacher named Jean Short. I was in the GATE program, and it was very interesting in Sacramento. There was like a mix of where they were bringing in kids from the suburbs and then kids from more urban communities together into one class. And so there were a lot of things that we were doing that I was not always able to do or needed the scholarship to do. But one of the things she did is she took me to see Jacques Cousteau's son. I want to say it was here at UC Davis for a speech, and it just really gave me this thinking of like college is an opportunity for me, and this is something that I'm working towards. And so she definitely impacted me in a positive way. We're still friends on Facebook, and so I would say Jean Short.
That's great. Great teachers open doors. How about you, Beth?
I'm going to say college professor, which I suppose explains kind of why I ended up where I did. I had a religious studies professor. I went to undergrad at UC San Diego. His name was Richard Cohen, and he taught the best Buddhism classes that I've ever taken, and it really opened my mind to the power of inquiry and storytelling in primary sources.
That's great. That's a great memory. One more question for both of you. What piece of advice would you share with a first-year teacher just entering the classroom? Next month.
Okay, we just did a workshop with teachers from a charter school.
Okay.
And so my advice to them is usually let your students' excitement drive like your purpose, and let your students see themselves in your classroom in as many ways as possible.
Okay, I like that. That's good advice. How about you, Dawniell?
And I would say along those lines that connection over content is building relationships within your classrooms with students and students with each other.
Right. Yeah. Very, very important. That's all my questions, but I'm going to give you a chance to ask me some questions. What's on your mind?
We did a workshop this summer, our Foundations of Freedom, around the America 250, and I know that you usually ask about playlists. So if we were putting together a playlist, which we did, on America's 250, what is a song that you would want to put on that playlist that represents America, or that you would say, yes, on this soundtrack, this is a song that needs to be on there?
I like quite a few songs, a lot of music that talks about how America still has work to do. And one of my favorite artists, or probably my favorite artist, is Stevie Wonder. And so there's a song, You Haven't Done Nothing, which I don't want to be negative, but that's a really powerful song that I like. And so I'd pick that one. There's others, but that's one that comes to mind immediately.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to stay on the America 250 topic.
Okay.
And as a university leader, what, as America is turning 250, how do you want universities to be remembered in the future?
So I think right now we're grappling with some powerful critiques of higher ed and universities. And I would like for us in the coming 250 years to really take stock of those critiques and not dismiss them, and think about what we might do to address the concerns that people have around affordability, accessibility, transparency, all the things that have been challenging for us in recent years. Hopefully it won't take another 250 years to resolve those issues, but that's what I would like for us to think about.
So back to history.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a historical figure that you could have a lunch with, who would that be?
Now, people are going to think we planned this, but I'm going to say Malcolm X, not because of one of your previous answers, but he is one of my heroes. I would say it's either Malcolm X or Nelson Mandela, and what they have in common is they were two leaders who had to pay a price, and that's always a compelling kind of story for me. One more that I would enjoy meeting just because I'm a fan, Muhammad Ali. And these are all relatively recent people. I guess I should go back a little bit further, but those are the three that come to mind.
Awesome. Since we're about to welcome students back on campus, I'm curious to know what are some of the rituals, and it can be around food, it can be around campus activities, that you want new UC Davis students to experience.
Oh, there's so many different traditions and things that we do that I think are really great around activities and athletics. And picnic day is a big one every year, our outreach to the community. So I would like for our new students to just really recognize what a powerful impact and influence that the university has, not just on Davis and the Sacramento region, but really nationally and internationally. So, and hope they all have a wonderful experience here at UC Davis.
Same.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Well, thank you both for a really stimulating conversation. I can see why you're both champions in your field and for your project, and I really appreciate you spending some time with us here today on Face to Face. And best of luck to every educator heading back to the classroom this month, and we'll see you next time on Face to Face. Go Ags.